Well, by my clock here, it is 1 p.m. So let's all be prompt here. So we're going to go ahead and start. In case you didn't know, this webinar is about loss of isolation. We're going to be led by one of the members of our education team, Jerome. He is one of our newer members, and he's really got some good information to share with everybody. Same format as we've always done in case you have or haven't been with us. We have the Q&A turned on, so you can drop a question there. Commenting is turned off, but you can put your question in the Q&A, and then we will get to it at the conclusion of this. Speaking of the conclusion of this, if you stay till the end, we will present you with a certificate, which you can put toward your personal development hours. So without further ado, Jerome, please take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Jimmy. Welcome to the March webinar. Diagnostic xEV is going to be a series of different webinars about different stuff for diagnosing EVs. So today is going to be loss of isolation. The reason why we decided to do this one today was because we met someone here at ConsulLab that owns a Tesla and got a problem with his PTC and found out that the component itself have a loss of isolation, preventing the car from driving. So we just push it beyond just saying that the component is now not functional and deep dive into that component and made some pretty good observation. So we just wanted to share it to you guys today. So if you have any question, just raise your hand. I won't be able to see those hands. So Jimmy, if you can check on that and just interrupt me if someone has a question. So today we're going to
be in the Q&A and I'll read them to you when they show up.
Sounds good. So basically we're going to use the EV400 for demonstrating that trainer can relate to real car. And we're also going to do some tests on the actual PTC that was sent to Tesla that, of course, was, that's working now. So, I'm Jerome, newest member of the educational team at ConsulLab in Quebec City. I've been teaching for 2 years in a school, also in Quebec. 11 years now with the Canadian Armed Forces Reserve. So as a mechanic, I've been teaching. I've been deployed 3 times all around the world. So yeah, now I'm here just doing some webinars and keep you in touch with all this new info and new product we got. So you can also follow me on LinkedIn and on YouTube. We have all the webinars and different videos about different product also. So what we're going to do today, so first we're going to just see how the system detects the loss of isolation, how the vehicle or the EV400 will react if there's any loss of isolation into the car product. Shutting down just to, after that, do some testing, so installation testing, and of course, isolate the actual problem. So first of all, and also if you guys have Indy 400 available next to you, feel free to just go around and play with it while I'm talking. So let's just drive the car. So I got my key fob here. I'm just gonna put it on his place. So basically here, what I have is this high voltage distribution block with that little display that show how many voltage is now on the system. So here you can see that I have a fault inserted. So of course, that's going to be our loss of isolation fault. So just by pushing a button, you can just activate it fault on the product. Super simple. So keys in, foot on the brake pedal, ignition on. You're going to see the contactor just cycling. And by doing that, you're going to see that the screen now showed that 400 volt-ish, and also that ready light here. So now on, you can just put the cars into drive mode and just simply push the accelerator pedal. The car is moving, and we're gonna see a little bit of a voltage drop here. That's normal. Okay. So now, let's say we're gonna activate the cabin heat. And now the contactor just opened it. Here into the fault indicator is like our scan tools. So we see now that we have a high voltage fault and also isolation fault. So this is how like the car will react if there's any isolation fault. Just shut it down. Now we can see that we are now having 0 volt on the vehicle. We cannot do anything else. So we're just gonna put it in park. We're gonna put ignition off. We're also gonna take off the keys, and now we can just analyze and probably just think of a strategy of what we're gonna do next, just to find out where's the problem actually. So we were driving the car normally down the road, and it was getting a little bit chilly, so we just turned the heat on, and then the car went off. So we basically know that the problem's probably going to be on the cabin heat side of the circuit, right? So first thing first, we want to do some testing. So we need to pay attention to the spec. So we can go to the service manual. For example, we can go to Tesla Model 3 service manual. And we say that we can see that on the PTC, we can only test it with the insulation meter at 250 volt. If we test it higher than that, we can permanently damage the component. So for example, if the PTC was good, but we're still doing some tests on, let's say, 1000 volts, we can also create another problem. Can also just fry the component, and now it's bad and we need to replace it. So we need to pay attention to those specs. So for example, here I have my Klein tool meter that we can, into the isolation test, we can go to 125 volt to 1 kV. So let's say we're going to put it on 250. And before doing that, we just want to neutralize the high voltage on the product, or let's say the vehicle. So first thing we're going to do is unplug the 12 volt battery. So by flipping those two switches, I'm going to unplug the 12 volt batteries. There we go. We can also, let's say, disconnect the first responder loop or the service disconnect. By doing that, we're going to prevent the contactor by close again. So we can do that. Now we're going to jump to the high voltage battery disconnect using our high voltage glove. So class 0 glove that we already, of course, inspect before every use. So we go to our service plug here. Every high voltage connector have a 3-step mechanism that we need to follow to be able to just take off the connector here. Now what we're going to do is take our DMM, and we're just going to do the live dead live test to make sure that there's no high voltage left into the car or the product. And the live dead live consists in testing like the 12 volt battery, and we know that we're supposed to have 12 volt, then testing the high voltage side, and then go back to the 12 volt battery to make sure that our meter actually is good and read the right things. So let's go, put in on the 12 volt batteries here. And as we can see, we have about 12 volt here. Let's switch back to the contactor, high voltage side. So since the contactor are supposed to be open, we have 0 volt, and we're going back to the 12 volt battery just to make sure that the meter is still good. and we should read about 12 volt. So here we go. So we know that meter is good. We have 0 volt on the high voltage side. So technically, the vehicle is safe to be worked on. Now we're going to do some testing and isolation testing. Speaking of, we want to test the circuit with the right amount of volt, and we are about 500 ohms per volt. Well, our system here is like about, let's say, 400 volts. So that means that a good isolation must be higher than 200,000 ohms. So everything below that can be considered a loss of isolation, right? So what we're going to do is with our meter, we're just going to go, let's say, to the positive side of the high voltage circuit and to the chassis ground here. What we're going to do, we're just going to press and hold the test button, and the display, let's say here. So now I'm about 188K, so I'm below 200,000 ohms. So I know that I have some type of isolation loss into the positive side of the high voltage circuit. So now I need to isolate the problem. So let's think of a good strategy. So here, the high voltage distribution is mostly the parts that is more accessible on a car. So what we're going to do is just, we want to isolate different part of the circuit and just testing and see if we lose that isolation problem. The reason why we want to start on the high voltage distribution part here is, like, if we want to go directly to each one of the components, let's say the inverter, the DC-DC, cabin heat, AC compressor, sometimes those components can be hard to access, and the distribution, high voltage distribution block here is more easy to access. So let's go straight into it. So high voltage, positive high voltage into the distribution block here to the chassis ground. And what I want to do is just start to unplug different part of my circuit. So those switches represent that harness here. So the reason why we didn't put harness on every switches, just because it's going to be too busy on the product. So let's say I'm just going to unplug the part that comes from the contactor. So now, by isolating that part here, if I still have my isolation problem, then I know that this part here is good. So let's try it. Still have my loss of isolation problem. So that part here is good. Let's say I'm unplugging the DC-DC converter. So I still have my loss of isolation. Let's say I'm unplugging the inverter. Test it again. Still have my problem. Unplugging the AC compressor. Again, still have my loss of isolation. Unplugging the PTC now, cabin heat. And now, as you can see, I have no more isolation problem. So now I need to make sure that the problem is not only in the harness here, and if it's in the PTC itself. So what I'm going to do is just plug the PTC harness to the high voltage distribution block and go to the component, the PTC itself, and unplug it. Test it again. No isolation fault. So now I know for a fact that my problem is in the PTC. Now the thing is, that meter is really good for one of the great thing is that we're gonna see here, now we can see 0 volt, okay? So that is the amount of voltage that's gonna be pushed into the circuit. So we're gonna charge the circuit, of course, to test it. And if we prematurely disconnect the probes, though the meter probes from the circuit, we don't allow the meter to just discharge the circuit. And this is one important thing. So if we go to, let's say, Tesla service manual again, we're gonna see some warnings and some videos that shown that if we push, let's say, to 250 volt, and we just unplug the meter probe too early, we can still have high voltage into the circuit left, and we can take another meter and just measure it out. So to prevent that, and this is why this meter is really good, is we can press and hold the bottom, and we're gonna see the voltage ramping up here. So we are about 268. If I'm just releasing the test bottom, we're gonna see the voltage dropping till 0. 0. So now I can unplug my probe. So this is something that you really want to make sure to do. So if your meter is not able to show you that, then you can just hold, test, wait, for example, 10 seconds, depending on the service manual, or you can just take another meter or the same meter, but put it in DC volt and measure out the system. So we found that the problem is in the PTC, right? So one thing is really nice to show you guys is that we actually have the PTC here. So that one was from the Tesla I just talked to you guys earlier. That was in a faulty condition. And that just show you that the AV400 can really relate. So the test we do on the product relates to real cars. And so now Tesla would have a faulty PTC, just replace it and voila. But we want to push ourselves a little bit further than just saying, okay, the PT is bad. So let's say I'm taking this plug here, okay? So I have, of course, my HV plus, HV negative, and I can just say, okay, let's put a probe into the case of the product or the component. Put my meter here, here. I'm taking this one here. I'm gonna take my high voltage glove. So I'm on HV plus. Let's test it. Here. And we have barely no resistance at all. So, and of course, I'm at 250 because the service manual says so. So I can see that there's a loss of isolation somewhere in the product. I can either go to the negative side, same reading. So let's jump further into the product here. Let's take that off. here. So I got my circuit board here with a bunch of transistors. So depending on how the product is designed, I may have or may not have some transistors here. So basically those transistors control each of the heat elements here, okay? So depending on the design, again, I can be able to see a loss of isolation on only one side of the high voltage circuit. So let's say only on the positive side, or maybe only on the negative side. Or in this case, I can read it in both, because I have isolation problem on one and two the elements here that fried one of those transistors. And by doing that, I create a short that just connect those both positive side and negative sides together, and that is why I got reading on both sides. So let's see. We're just gonna go and test each one of the different element here. So what I'm gonna do, again, put my HV glove, go here, and I'm just gonna test each one of those elements here. Again, 250 volt. I'm just gonna test this one here. And here we can see that we have no loss of isolation in this one. So let's move to the next one. Test it again. No loss of isolation. Move to the next one. Still no loss of isolation. Move to the next one here. And here we can see that this one here do have a loss of isolation. So just to make sure, we're just gonna go and do the other ones. That one's good. And the last one. So the last one's still good. So this one here is the faulty one. So yes, of course, the PTC is now bad, but we just move deep down into the product and see that there's actually just one element here that and somehow lost its isolation into the case ground. So maybe we can just, I don't know, replace that part here and maybe it will work. Of course, in that case, it fried one of the transistors here. So it won't work even if we just change the element here. But let's say that the transistors are perfectly fine. We can just say, hey, let's change that element and plug it back to the car. And let's see if it still works. Who knows? So that was just one really thing I wanted to show you guys today, and how that product relates to real problem and diagnosing on a real car. So it's super simple. We just need to pay attention to the small details as, for example, those specs. And also always have our PPE so we can work into a safe environment. So we just isolate the problem and mission accomplished, I guess. So thanks for attending. Hope to see you next month. I hope you guys enjoyed that little webinar. Like I told you guys at the beginning, that Diagnosing xEVs will be a series of mini webinars. If you have any comments, if you have any ideas, things you want us to talk about, feel free to write us. Feel free to just follow us on our LinkedIn page or even YouTube channel. Or
Jerome,
even,
we have a question.
yep.
Glenn would like you to explain and demonstrate the removing of the voltage from a component after testing LOI so that we don't leave the circuit component charged up.
Okay, let me just go back to here. So of course it will depend on the component we've been testing. So some of the component, for example, of course the inverter will have some capacitor inside that will be keeping that voltage we are pushing through the circuit by testing it with our meter here, okay? So for example here, let's put it on one of the element that is still perfectly fine. And since for example, since this one is already bad, I can put it on, let's say, 1,000 volt here. Okay. So I'm just gonna press the test button, and I'm gonna see that I'm gonna go around 1,000 volt on the bottom of the screen. So I'm taking this part here and test it. We're gonna see about 1,000 volt here. So I'm just gonna release that test button, okay, and see how the voltage drops, but not immediately drops, but slowly. So here we go, till 0. So imagine that component here, so that heat element doesn't have any capacitor in it. But let's say if it was an inverter, that 1,000 volt would just shoot directly to the circuit, just going to be absorbed by the capacitor and somehow. And if I don't let the range here go to 0, I might still have some voltage into the component. So if I'm just unplug it to the component and touch it or whatever, I can create a short or a spark. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, Glenn, if you still have more questions, feel free to drop it again in the Q&A. And as Jerome indicated, our YouTube channel is a great resource. All of this webinar and all the previous ones will be up on our YouTube channel. If you have your phones available, you can scan that QR code that's on your screen right there. It takes you right to our YouTube channel. We've got not just product videos, but every single webinar we've done is in a playlist called webinars. And this one will be up there within 24 hours. We do thank everybody for their time. And we've got another post here. Okay, so Glenn has a follow-up. So we just need to wait and confirm that the voltage level is at 0?
Yeah, so basically, if you don't have, like I told you guys, if you don't have let me just show you back my camera here. So yeah, if you wait to 0, so the meter will have discharged the circuit, okay? And if your meter doesn't show you that here, you can, for example, after testing it, you can wait about, like, let's say 5 to 10 seconds max, and we can just take a meter, put it back to volt, so let's say DC volt, and we're just gonna go back to the pins that we just test and see if there's any voltage left. So let's say here, I have 0. So you can either check it by doing this, or if you have that type of meter, the Klein tool here, ET600, is going to show you that. Yeah.
Very good. Hopefully. And Glenn, of course, if you still Glenn or anybody else still with us, if you got any more questions, we're here to answer questions in the Q&A. And otherwise, we will have another webinar next month. Jerome, do you know what it's about yet?
No, we don't know yet, but
we're working on it.
it's gonna, yeah, we're gonna work on it. It's gonna probably be on other things about EVs. But like I told you guys, if you have any suggestions and any things you want us to talk about, feel free to write us an email. Here's my email there. You can email Jimmy also. Uh, just tell us what you want.
Yeah, info@consolab.com is a super easy way to get to anybody
Yep.
who needs to see anything here at Consolab. Info@consolab.com. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel. We do appreciate everybody's time. And Jerome, I want to thank you for your time and knowledge on this subject. And I guess we'll conclude this webinar.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.